Jay Jaffe joins us once again from his home in Brooklyn for our weekly chat. Mr. Jaffe, you can find on fangraphs.com. Check out Jay on Twitter at Jay_Jaffe. And look, it's spring training. You've got a lot of great articles up on Fangraphs right now as we are really in the midst of baseball season. I'm excited about it, Jay, and excited about watching games again, seeing things. And even though we always do the same routine every spring, we always say spring stats don't mean anything. I still think it's nice to see some of these guys getting a chance to at least thrive, and some names that might not normally be names we would hear during the season get a little extra attention here in early March.
Yeah, it's fun to see the prospects getting a look, especially since it's been a while since we really got that. We didn't really get video from the alternate sites last year, or the training camps, in the summer. So, like seeing Bobby Witt Jr. of the Royals hit that long home run the other day was kind of cool. It's also, I really, this time of year, I'm really looking a lot, and I've been covering a lot at Fangraphs, looking at the pitchers who were injured last year coming out and making their first spring starts, usually only throwing an inning or two, but it's exciting to see Shohei Ohtani again, to see David Price and Steven Strasburg back, and to think about what the upcoming season holds for them, and how they fit into to the respective rotations.
You just wrote about that. Actually, you wrote about Strasburg today, and I think you had you wrote about Ohtani a couple of days ago, and it was interesting too because you also included Fangraphs projections for this year versus last year's performance, and to see where the difference could be in wins above replacement. And, the one thing that I guess surprised me a little bit was the fact that of all the teams in baseball, the team that has the projected largest wins above replacement from last year would have been the Boston Red Sox.
They were so bad last year from a pitching standpoint. They dead last in the majors in wins above replacement. They didn't have Eduardo Rodriguez at all due to myocarditis. They didn't have Chris Sale due to Tommy John surgery. They were throwing dog meat out there. A lot of relievers who probably wouldn't even be in the major leagues doing opener spots and things like that. So that kind of dragged down their ranking. But they've got Rodriguez back. They'll get Sale back later this summer. It's going to be a few months, and it could take him to find to find his command again and his velocity again. But he's probably, even then, is probably going to be an upgrade over what was there last year. They brought in Garrett Richards. It's a rotation that doesn't scare a lot of people, but it could help make them competitive in the AL East.
You look at the other teams that are right there in terms of the largest differential of wins above replacement over the last couple of years, or last 2 years. You've got Washington right behind Boston, then Detroit, Toronto, Atlanta, Texas, Arizona, Pittsburgh, and the Royals. I mean, that's really the top group. If you're wondering about the Dodgers are kind of middle of the pack with the Yankees just because they had such a high WAR last year. So I think it's hard to improve on that just when you're so good from the previous season.
Yeah, that's I think the first thing, or one of the first things I think some people look at is, where are the Padres, man? They got Yu Darvish and Blake Snell. Why aren't they like number one here? Well, the answer is they're number one in our overall rankings, our projections for the season in terms of the rotation. But they were number 5 or number 6 last year in terms of rotation performance. So it's not like they had a lot of room to improve, it's tough even for some of these guys to replicate the work they did last year. I mean, they lost Mike Clevenger, who did good work. They traded Zach Davies, who did pretty good work. Dinelson Lamet is going to be hard pressed to match the low ERA and FIP that he posted. Things like that. On the other hand, they should probably get a better version of Chris Paddock than they got, but by this measure, they only come out like middle of the pack. I think they actually lose a little bit of ground, but it's nothing to worry about. It's just a way of highlighting where the big changes are. Teams leaping from bad to middle of the pack, or middle of the pack to good, or good to great.
And if you're wondering who went from good to worse, or at least based on the numbers, and kind of I guess the bottom group, you would have Houston, Baltimore, Seattle, Milwaukee, Philadelphia, Minnesota, the Cubs, Cleveland, and Cincinnati. Jay, you think there's any of those staffs that have a chance to actually outperform the bottom projection?
Yeah, I think, I think the thing about these projections is they're driven by fielding independent pitching, which is basically, teams or pitchers strikeouts, walks, and homer rates. And a good defense can help shave some runs off of that. Invariably, when a guy does really well, it usually has to do with getting extra good defensive support. Both the two teams at the bottom, the two Ohio teams, they had their respective league Cy Young winners last year. Now, Trevor Bauer left via free agency, and the Reds defense has taken a hit. They don't, they're not even sure what they're doing at shortstop right now. They got some excellent pitchers like Luis Castillo and Sonny Gray, but they're probably going to take a step back. Cleveland, Shane Bieber was just, ridiculous last year. He'll be excellent even if he does regress some. But that's a rotation that I can see taking a step back. At the same time, they have a long track record of getting a lot out of their pitching prospects, turning, guys who are relatively unheralded like Zach Plesac and Clevenger and Bieber himself into frontline starters.
Jay Jaffe talking baseball and later on talking a little beer with us here on the program at 27 past the hour as we continue. It's a great write-up. It's up at fangraphs.com right now. Check it out. A lot of information to digest. Now, I mentioned Ohtani. You wrote about him too. When he came into the league, the idea was elite pitcher, elite hitter. And unfortunately, the injuries derailed him early on in his pitching career. And then he was able to play some DH and still hit and hit well. Do you expect Shohei Ohtani to ever get to that point now following the surgery where he could be that dominant two-way player we've been waiting for?
Look, I hope so. The indicators are there. I mean, he can throw 100 miles an hour at peak velocity with his fastball. He's got just an elite split-fingered fastball. The question is reps. Can he stay healthy? We had a 9-start run from him at the beginning of his major league career in 2018, and then it all started falling apart. We've gotten 4 major league starts since, and ugly starts at that. I think it's 9 or 10 runs allowed and 10 walks. And a lot of rehab in between that. The signs are good right now. I mean, he's not rehabbing this spring, and that's been something that's been, characteristic of his last, his last few springs. He's had to deal with rehabbing injuries. So the hope is that he can do this. Now, he had to rebuild his swing on the other side because he got into some bad habits last year due to his injuries and basically because he was concentrating so much on rehab that he wasn't getting his lower body work in. And so he was mechanically out of whack. But the exit velocities are there. He hit one 468 feet the other day, towering home run over the batter's eye at Tempe Diablo Stadium. The raw materials are there. It's a matter of staying on the field for him. If he does, I hope we can see things in line with what we saw in the first half of 2018. At the very least, you've got a very good hitter there, and I expect him to be better there. I think they'll have to manage his innings, but I do think that we'll hopefully at least see some amount of the real goods, for what we've expected out of Ohtani for so long.
Back right now with Jay Jaffe from Fangraphs.com as we continue here on Sports Talk. Check out all of his great work. It's up on the website. We've previewed a lot of it here early on during the first half of the segment. Want to ask you now about your story on David Price. He's coming back from injury. He says he's healthy, yet the Dodgers are so loaded with this rotation, and they have so many good young options with guys like Urias and May and Gonsolin. Do you think the Dodgers are better with Price in the rotation or having him in the bullpen?
Well, I think that's kind of a tough question to answer. If David Price is stretched out, I think he's best off in the rotation. I think it's a question of how stretched out he'll be by the start of the season. I also think that the Dodgers are going to do a lot of mixing and matching. They're going to be, if you look, one thing I showed in that article is that the Dodgers have gotten very high performance from their starting pitchers over the last 5 years while working very hard not to overwork them. Only twice have they had starters reach 30 starts in a season. Only 5 times have they had starters qualify for the ERA title, which is 1 inning per scheduled game, so 162 innings in most year. So they didn't have anybody qualify last year in the short season. They will probably be swapping guys in and out of the rotation to give them a bit of a breather as they manage the ramping up from 60 games to 162 games. I think, in some ways, I think you can look back at what they did in October for kind of a model. You might see Gonsolin or May throw 2 innings and then somebody of the opposite hand come in, whether that's Urias or Price or something like that. You might see guys take a midseason detour to the bullpen. I think they're going to do a lot of experimentation, and I think it'll be fluid. I think Kershaw and Buehler even will probably have some starts where it's like, yeah, they probably could have gone 7 innings, but maybe they only go 4 innings because they don't want these guys to throw 200 over the course of the season.
Don't you think, though, that of all the teams in baseball, the Dodgers have more options right now in terms of their pitching than probably any team, quality options than anybody in the game?
Yeah, they do. And they're even talking in terms of having an 8th starter available in Jimmy Nelson, a guy who's been rehabbing from a shoulder and back injuries over the last couple of years, who's looked really good so far in the early going. I mean, he's one of those, I'll believe it when I see it. But when Dave Roberts talks about these guys, he's adamant that we have 8 starters right now. The thing about having, quote unquote, too much pitching is you never really have too much pitching because somebody's always got some reason that they could probably go on the injured list for and shore up. Guys, arm injuries, leg injuries, things like that. Things that are minor that would be dealt with. The Dodgers are just very quick to send a guy on a little 10-day vacation.
Hey, Felix Hernandez is trying to make the Baltimore Orioles staff, but his velocity is way down, topping off like 85, 86. He still would like to get to those magic numbers where he could have a shot one day in Cooperstown. Now, there was a period of time for about 9 or 10 years where he was the king. King Felix, one of the most dominant pitchers in the game with Seattle. Based on your JAWS metrics from the Cooperstown casebook, you tell me how far off is Felix Hernandez from legitimately having a real shot at trying to get into Cooperstown?
I think he's far off, unfortunately. I mean, I think he had a really great run there for a while, but his performance has really been deteriorating ever since about 2014. He had, I think it's something like 6 straight years where his ERA increased. Workloads have gone down, strikeout rates have gone down. It's just been a nonstop downhill ride. And I think it's because he was worked so heavily when he was young, and he didn't work as hard as I think by his own admission to stay in shape after that. So I think he's got a real uphill battle. I know he's talked about getting to the Hall of Fame. He sees 200 wins and 3,000 strikeouts as things that will boost his chances. If he can stick around for them, yes, I think he's got a shot. He's at 169 wins right now and 2,524 strikeouts. That's like at least 3 good years, 3 solid years of work for him. And if he's throwing 85, 86 right now, I don't know that that's possible. I hope that he finds a little bit of extra velocity. I don't know why he's not out there at like Driveline Baseball or one of those other gurus, throwing weighted balls and trying to rejuvenate his arm and the rest of his body. Baltimore, obviously desperate for pitching. They were so bad last year. That's a tough place for a pitcher, though. Tough ballpark for a pitcher. And he's, not only pitching in Camden Yards half the time, but you got to go to Fenway Park and Yankee Stadium as well.
Ironically, Seattle, the team that he did so much work for over the years, they're talking now about a 6-man rotation again this year like they did last year. Are you a proponent of 6-man staffs, or do you think that sticking with a conventional 5-man rotation is still the best bet?
I think for a team that's got a lot of young arms and maybe not a lot at stake, I think it's okay to look at a 6-man rotation. Especially this year when you're going to see innings limits. I mean, the Tigers, I believe, are another team that's looking at that. They've got, Casey Mize and some other young prospects, and Michael Fulmer coming back from Tommy John surgery. They're going to be really conservative with how hard they work these guys. We haven't really seen a team sustain a 6-man rotation over the course of a full season. It's inevitable that somebody will. Maybe this year is the year we'll see it. I think back to when the Dodgers were the team that introduced the 5-man rotation in the mid 70s, because they had 5 great starting pitchers, or 5 excellent starting pitchers once Tommy John came back from the Tommy John surgery. It's slow progress, but I think though at some point, when you realize that you're taking, half a dozen starts away from your better pitchers, it makes sense to try to work, try to get more out of them and less out of your 6th best starter, because at some point you're just watering down the team's chances of winning.
Jay, preview what you've got coming up here in the next couple of days at Fangraphs and some of the stories you're going to be covering and writing about.
Okay, right now I'm working on a quick thing on the Yankees bullpen in the wake of Zach Britton's injury. He could miss almost half the season after having bone chips removed from his elbow. Then I'm going to take a look at Juan Soto, whom the Nationals general manager Mike Rizzo says the team is planning to offer him an extension. I took a look at the projections for this guy. They're unfreaking believable. He has already established himself as one of the great young hitters in the game. The 3 seasons he's put up there, he's up there on leaderboards with names like Cobb and Hornsby and Williams in terms of just how good he is offensively. He's the real deal. We're talking about a player who, if you were to offer him an extension worth $400 million over the next 10 years, it would probably be underpaying him. That's how good this projection is. It's just one of those things that kind of breaks the system. So looking at that and looking at the way that young players like that are already on the road to the Hall of Fame, this is something similar to what I did with Fernando Tatis Jr. a few weeks ago and Carlos Correa a couple of weeks ago as well. This one's going to be a fun one.
Can't wait. That's going to be terrific. So that's coming up at fangraphs.com. All right. It's about time for your beer pick of the week. But before we get to that, I picked up a 6-pack of this last week. And I know you love porters as much as I do, Jay. Porters and stouts. Well, one of the all-time greats, I saw this and I hadn't had this in a while, Deschutes Black Butte Porter. And I know it had a 6-pack. It had my name all over it. And in fact, it was packaged on like late November. So it's still good for porter, and had one over the weekend. It is so good, so strong. And when I say strong, I mean just quality beer, Jay. Checks in at 5.5%, 30 IBUs, but one of my all-time favorite porters, the Deschutes Black Butte.
Yeah, that one's a great one. It's one of my favorites too. I've brought some back from trips out west. It's rare that I can get it out here. A few years ago, I was in Philadelphia for a weekend, and it gets as far as Philadelphia and New Jersey. So if I remember to look for it, I can occasionally score some. But
nice.
It's not something, unfortunately, that we get here in New York City right now. So my beer pick of the week is one I've had before, but it's one that I always take note of when I get it, because it's kind of the humble brag. But I had a couple cans of Heady Topper a couple weeks ago here. Heady Topper is brewed up in Vermont. It's a New England IPA. It's considered probably the best of the East Coast IPAs. This one, it's hazy, it's citrusy, kind of orangey. A little biscuity with the malt, a little piney on the back end. It is a perfect beer. They do another beer called Focal Banger, which might be a little too intense. This one is just it's another IPA, and some people like it better. I don't see the case for it. This one is it's so perfect. It's like, why would you ever do anything else? They've expanded their distribution a little bit, or expanded their manufacturing a bit, so it's easier to score it. I don't get up that way, but I have friends who do, whether they're on skiing or visiting family. So about once or twice a year, we get our hands on a 4-pack, and it's always a treat.
That sounds like fun. What's the ABVs on that?
It's 8%. It classifies as a double IPA. It's one of those. It's a little on the heavy side, but well worth it.
Awesome stuff. Love it. Love the fact you brought Heady Topper back with us this week. Great job. Jay, look forward to right back again next week. It'll be March Madness, college basketball time. And since the tournament will start next Thursday, we'll have Wednesday open, and look forward to our weekly chat with you as always.
All right. Sounds great, Steve. Thanks a lot.